The game opens with this really awful, devastating explosion. It knocks down 6 square blocks of Empire City.
Hurts and kills, thousands of people.
But somehow you survive. You have these crazy electrical powers. One of the things that we really find fun about superhero stories is the process of understanding where these powers came from and why they're there. In Infamous, this isn't a question that gets answered all for you at the beginning of the game.
The phrase that we always talked about was zero to hero. You want to be this guy who's incredibly low status at the beginning of the game, and you want to be either famous or infamous at the end. You become this superhuman person. Do you use that for good or for evil?
The sorts of decisions you make like that, minute to minute, affect how the whole city reacts to you.
There's a lot of depth in the behaviors of both the enemies and also the non-player characters, just the citizens.
I've been robbed!
The sort of systemic complexity of the game is something that allows the player to have unexpected, exciting things happen.
Feds dropped some more medical supplies, but they landed on that roof. Could you knock them down?
There's this enormous world of side missions and quests that you can do in Infamous, which is on the order of 3 times as many things as the primary path has.
You're not in just one big long tunnel going from the beginning of the mission to the end of the mission every time. You're in a city and you can go wherever you want, whenever you want.
We are asking a critical thing of our players and our viewers, which is to believe that someone could get electrically superpowered. And that's kind of the gateway to the whole game.
Electricity is great because it's kind of malleable in what you can do with it. I mean, you can do the obvious, which is shoot somebody in the face with a lightning bolt, which is, I know, for me, kind of a core fantasy.
He starts out with 2 or 3 superpowers he can do, and throughout the game we unlock more and more of them.
He starts off with the ability to throw electricity from his hands, and he has the ability to throw out electromagnetic pulse waves.
It's an electric wave that's traveling out in front of him. Everything from that to the really crazy stuff you might expect with lightning, which is calling down a massive thunderstrike. There are more conventional things like grenades and rockets, but we've framed them in a way that it is Cole using and extending his powers.
Over the course of the game, you end up getting another 15 or 16 powers, and those powers, in addition to the ones you start off with, are all upgradable, at least 3 ways, and most of them actually end up having good and bad upgrades you can do depending on how you're playing the game. If you multiply it all out, I think you got over 80 powers that you end up with.
Cole is very dependent on electricity, and while it's a source of his strength, there are also a lot of weaknesses associated with that.
I'm so totally grateful. You're a lifesaver.
One of his powers is that he can kind of resuscitate people who are injured, or on the other hand, he can drain the electricity from people in the game and use that to fuel his own superpowers. Anytime that there's an interesting resource that the character wants that inherently hurts someone else, you're faced with this choice of, I want this thing, am I willing to hurt this person to get it?
So in a lot of ways, he's kind of challenged by this gift. This is the game that delivers on something I've thought about all the time, which is, if I had superpowers, what would I do with them? If I could turn invisible, would I go on a stealth mission for the FBI, or would I sneak into the girls' locker room? These are the kind of challenges that would be presented to you as a real life person when given superpowers.
We really wanted to kind of take you through that journey that you read about in graphic novels and you see on superhero movies. We wanted you to play that.
Going to panels and listening to people talk and stuff like that, it's going to be really cool to be like on the other side and finding out that there's enough people out there that really see Infamous as like this comic book come to life.
I think when we were doing the original Infamous, we knew we were doing superhero, but I don't think we wanted to do it in kind of super traditional superhero way. Like, the first thing we'd have to tell people is, no, he doesn't wear tights or anything like that. It's like, what if it's a regular person who would get superpowers?
Most direct influences on Infamous don't come from the comics I read growing up. It's from all the media that was influenced by those comics. So it's kind of second generation stuff. So Batman movies, especially the recent Batman movies, have been a big influence for us because They have that sort of spirit of comics in them, but it's filtered through a modern, up-to-date gestalt. The city feels realistic.
If you go back to the 1950s Spider-Man when he first started, the stuff is so ridiculous. He's having conversations with his enemies as he's fighting them, like between punches. Now, what I'm about to do to you is, and he's wearing underwear, like this crazy. The powers are kind of the element that's still similar to comic books, but then we're trying to marry that with a realistic environment and an art style that makes it more believable to people who aren't necessarily huge comic book fans.
But if you go too real, then some of the stuff that we're trying to do, a guy having electricity powers and crazy supervillains, then that doesn't work anymore. So you want to be in that space where that's believable.
Real characters that have real problems. Peter Parker has to make rent. Bruce Banner has to actually deal with being a fugitive. And Tony Stark, he's an alcoholic, and that's the type of character that, Cole is. We feel that people just related to him on a level that even we didn't expect.
There's an experience that everybody wants to have, which is to be a superhero. If we can make a game that lets you be that superhero and own that experience, that's really my objective.
And I think we are probably still the underdog, of the whole thing. Marvel and DC and Batman, Spider-Man, all those guys have years and years of history of kind of ingrained into the modern culture. So we're just trying to, put our notch on it.